Hi all, welcome back to Tallulah Talks, and today it is Saturday, which means it is Saturday's haunting hour. I do want to apologise because my last video I did on Eileen, Warnos, I called her Arlene, and massive brain fart, so I do apologise for that. Today, this story freaks me out. And it depends on what you believe, if you believe in the supernatural, paranormal, whatever. But most of you will actually know this case through the movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose. For those of you who haven't seen it, it's about this young girl from a very devout Catholic family. She goes off to college and she starts experiencing these. Well, she believes she's possessed. So she starts experiencing like hallucinations, possessions, and in the end, unfortunately, she does die. Now, this is based off a real young woman called Anneliese Michel. She is German and she was born to a strict Catholic family in West Germany on the 21st of September 1952. When she was a child, she was described as nice and likable by anyone who knew her. However, this all changed. In 1968, when Anneliese was just 16 years old, she was still in high school. She had her first episode of what medical professionals would call like epileptic seizures or fits. It was said that during these episodes, she herself would lose consciousness, but she would still be walking around talking to people, and she just didn't remember this. She just like blacked out. She also said that at night she felt something on top of her, which, yeah, that's quite scary. She felt something holding her down at night. And she actually continued to have these seizures until she was sent to the doctors for a medical diagnosis. So the doctors basically told the family and Anneliese that she was suffering from temporal lobe epilepsy. And you've got to remember, this is back in the 60s, so even though you might not believe in the paranormal, and if she actually did have epilepsy, they weren't as advanced as the drugs weren't as advanced as what they are now. She was eventually admitted to hospital where she began experiencing what she called demonic hallucinations. Like, she honestly entirely believed that she was possessed by demons. They tried numerous medications with Anneliese, but none of them seemed to help. But again, this might just be because of the time it was in. Medicines weren't as advanced as what they are now. So due to this and the medications not working and these seizures continuing and the hallucinations, Anneliese actually fell into a deep depression. And since none of the medical doctors could help the family then turned to the church. The family met with a pastor named Ernst Alt, I can't really pronounce that, who believed that Anneliese wasn't suffering from epilepsy, but she was in fact suffering from demonic possession. Again, this kind of entirely depends on what you believe, but there are like recordings, like audio recordings, and Anneliese could be heard like speaking in different languages, and it was said that she was possessed by 6 demons, and that it was like they were all kind of fighting for power, and they all had a different voice that was coming out of her, and it was just what was happening at the time. They couldn't really explain it medically. It was at this time that Anneliese actually seemed to get worse. She barely slept. She apparently fed on spiders and different bugs, and even went so far as to drink her own urine. This then led to exorcisms, which were conducted by the pastor. And on September 25th, the first of 67 exorcisms were performed. This poor girl. The exorcisms were also documented and recorded by priests on cassettes. Now, I will not be adding these into this video. I have never listened to them. I never want to listen to them. It honestly just freaks me out. But apparently when I think the tapes were played like at the end of the story, the family goes to court, and I think the tapes were actually played in court, and it was said to have freaked a lot of people out. And also, interestingly enough, these cassettes were also sent to, I believe it was the Warrens. They didn't really have much to do with this case, but they had listened to the recordings and basically advised that they try and exorcise these demons from this poor girl. According to these recordings, Anneliese claimed to be possessed by, again, 6 demons, with her voice being unrecognizable. So it wasn't even her voice that was coming out of her. It was almost like she was a different person entirely. What made these... I can't even read my own writing, sorry. But basically, Anneliese claimed to be possessed by an excommunicated priest. She would have no way of knowing who this person was. Back then they didn't have the internet. And she was said to be possessed by Valentin Feischmann. And like I say, he was excommunicated from the church. And again, there was no reason for Anneliese to even have heard of who he was. Like, no one had ever mentioned him. The priests had never mentioned him. And she actually also gave very accurate details of his life, which I guess the priests who were there would have known, like, were correct, and they were just like, what? The exorcisms continued, and her state of well-being became more and more complex. Anneliese refused to eat a lot of the time, stating that the demons who were in her were not allowing her to eat. And even though she was malnourished and had lost a lot of weight, it was still said that she had quite a lot of strength in her. And the family completely trusted the exorcists and refused any more medical help. Over the years, Anneliese described walking around in a trance-like state, not remembering anything. So this is back to when her convulsions first started, and this would happen quite often, and it was again happening again. After her original diagnosis, Anneliese took medications that were prescribed by the doctors and then enrolled in the University of Würzburg in Germany in 1973. It was at this time, when she left for university, that Anneliese began seeing faces of demons and even heard them whispering to her. Over time, things got really, really bad with Anneliese, to the point where she would rip off her clothing and would be performing 400 squats a day. I don't know if this was some sort of punishment. I am not entirely sure. It was said that she even would crawl under the table and bark like a dog for 2 days straight. Over 10 months, 2 priests performed 67 exorcisms, which could last up to 4 hours. It was during these exorcisms that Anneliese believed she was possessed by 6 demons, and she believed these were Lucifer, Cain, Judas, Hitler, Neo, and the excommunicated priest Feichmann. And as I did also say earlier, it was like all the demons would kind of battle for power within Anneliese, and would often communicate from her mouth with like low animal-like growls, like the type of sound that humans just could not make. During these sessions, Anneliese, it broke, again, I can't read my own writing, this is ridiculous, broke several bones and even ripped tendons in her knees from constantly like kneeling to pray. So obviously she was, like I say, she completely believed that she was being possessed by demons, and so she was kneeling all the time praying that these things would leave her. It was on the 1st of July 1976 that unfortunately Anneliese died in her home, and the cause of death was reported as malnutrition and dehydration, because again she believed that demons inside her would not let her eat or drink. It was after this that her parents and the priests were charged with negligent homicide, because they refused to seek out any more medical help. However, none of them went to prison, and it was instead suggested that for the priests they would get a fine, and I think the jury had basically decided the parents had already been through enough at that point. So in 1978, a trial began, and the defense argued that the exorcisms were completely legal. The priests got in touch with, I think it was like the Vatican you have to get in touch with. They had approved the exorcisms. I believe Anneliese gave her consent. The parents gave their consent, and that was not illegal at the time. The defense, as I said earlier, also played the tapes recorded by the priest and listened to the demons arguing within the young girl. And again, like, everyone in the court was just like really freaked out by this. It was like nothing they had ever heard before. The bishop who had agreed to the exorcisms stated that at the time that he did agree to them, he did not know how bad Anneliese's health condition actually was when he approved these exorcisms. And so in April 1978, the priests and the parents were charged with negligent homicide with suspended sentences, with, again, the priests just getting a fine, and the parents actually had to pay for the legal proceedings. And that's the unfortunate, sad story of Anneliese Michel. I mean, you can believe whatever you want if you believe in things like that. I definitely believe in the paranormal and the supernatural. There may be some psychological explanation for her behaviours. There may be some reason why the medications didn't work for her. But that's entirely up to you to decide. So if you like these sorts of videos, and if you have any suggestions for me, just leave them in the comments, leave them on my Facebook page, and I will see what I can do. And I will see you guys on Wednesday.